Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, December 26th, 2021. I hope you guys had a good Christmas. I decided to take a step back for yesterday. I decided not to do any type of holiday themed video. Ultimately, I just wanted to spend more time with my family, so I withdrew myself from creating a video on Christmas Day. But here I am back the day after, and we're right back into the midst of things with 2022 election data from the National Republican Senatorial Committee. And we'll talk a bit about what they actually are and who they represent, and what these two new polls from Georgia and Nevada, two hotly contested swing states for the 2022 midterm elections, are telling us in these brand new polls. Now, the NRSC might not be a name that we all recognize when watching this video, and that makes a bit of sense. The NRSC has pretty much been the behind-the-scenes Republican wing of the United States Senate that is primarily focused on winning election after election after election. They are constantly fundraising, constantly sending out emails. I've signed up for both the Democratic Senatorial Committee and the Republican one to take a look at their fundraising efforts, and I would say both are going equally as hard. In fact, the NRSC, I would say, is going a bit more intensely. You will see constant numbers of emails and text messages that come directly from the Republican Senatorial Committee. Overall, this is just a fundraising machine and an effort and a coalition of Republican senators, incumbents at that are aiming to win re-election and continue or win control for the Republican Party in the United States Senate, and they have been in full force during this election season. They are focused, again, primarily on Senate elections. They do work with the Congressional Committee on joint types of fundraising efforts and dispersing funds and things of that nature, but the NRSC, when you look at it, when you're talking about what we are messing with today and discussing today, it is only and solely for the United States Senate and individually now Nevada and Georgia for the importance and the scope of this video. But just for a bit of background, the NRSC is led by Senator Rick Scott from the state of Florida, who has been the chairman of the NRSC, someone who was actually recently elected to the United States Senate back in 2018, now going on to serve as the chair. Ultimately, this is a very big role that he has taken on, and he has promised and made commitments to the voters and the Republican Party that they will certainly win back control of the United States Senate and win in upwards of 4 to 5 Senate seats from the Democratic Party, pointing out a number of key races. And these two new polls, I'm sure, as you can tell straight off the bat, show the Republican Party ahead, but you have to keep in mind that this is a Republican pollster that is doing the numbers. These are numbers that are made for the Republican Party as a bit of an internal measurement, more than it is to be something viewed from the outside like I am today. But at the end of the day, these numbers are important to report, and they won't be covered primarily by CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, because these are numbers that are not ran by those major media companies, but it is important to point out. And there are some headlines to take away from it. And it says that in this one from NBC News that Republicans could, and emphasis on could, flip 2 Senate seats in Georgia and Nevada as new GOP polling shows, an emphasis on the GOP polling part of this, because these are polls that, again, are done by the Republican Senatorial Committee. So to assume there's no type of inherent bias or inherent shift in terms of the framing of the questions or who they ask or what type of sample they are trying to assess, there's always that underlying message, there's always that underlying understanding when you answer a call from the National Republican Senatorial Committee. People who are more friendly to answer are likely to be more Republican, just based off the fact that if you are a staunch Democrat and you are getting a call from the NRSC in terms of polling data, you might not necessarily be inclined to answer their calls or even answer truthfully, right? So looking at these two new polls, they were taken at 2 different times. One was December 4th through 8th, so more recently in the state of Georgia, and then one a bit further back in Nevada between November 14th and November 17th. So the November 14th through 17th was right after Glenn Youngkin was winning in Virginia and Jack Ciattarelli nearly won in New Jersey. Republicans had a huge surge in support across both of those states, and I would say at that point in time, they were definitely riding a bit higher of a point than they are today. I mean, the generic ballot numbers are worse for Republicans now than they were back then. And in the state of Georgia, I would say, because this is more recent, this is definitely more impacted by what we've seen with discussions about inflation and gas prices and things of that nature between Joe Biden and the American people. So definitely a bit different of a national environment, but generally speaking, Joe Biden was unpopular, Republicans were ahead, and they just recently came out with victories in Virginia and nearly in New Jersey. So these two new polls, well, what do they mean? Pretty much. Something that we can take away from this is exactly what I told you in my most recent projection across the Senate elections, that Georgia was going to be closer than Nevada. And I know that may seem to be at least baffling, and it makes sense at this point in time. If you're talking about a snapshot of July 2021, I would have disagreed with you on that point. When you take a look at the numbers from July of 2021, they may have the same rating, but I was much more confident in a Democratic victory in Nevada than I was in Georgia. And as the months went on, it actually got closer in Georgia than it did in Nevada. But now things are different. And things are different primarily because of who is running in Georgia and what we're seeing on opposite elections. Governor election coinciding with the Senate election. Singular candidates like Stacey Abrams can end up boosting turnout for a singular political party. You don't see a Stacey Abrams in the state of Nevada. In fact, Steve Sisolak as the incumbent governor isn't anywhere near in comparison and doesn't seem to be performing as well as people would like on the Democratic side in order for that to boost the Senate election. So looking at what we've seen and what I've been telling you is that I expect Nevada to be more of a Republican victory than I do Georgia. And I can explain a bit more of that reasoning behind it, but these numbers from the NRSC actually back that up. Because you can see in the Nevada polling that Adam Laxalt, who used to serve as the Attorney General, he was first elected back in 2014, and might I add, by a very narrow margin. I mean, 2014, ultimately, Nevada had a governor, an incumbent, Brian Sandoval, the Republican, who won over 70% of the vote. He won over 70% of the vote, won by more than 40%. One of the largest Republican victories in any statewide election that was contested in the past 10 years. One of the largest, right? Even outperforming Republicans in Wyoming and North Dakota and Alabama and Mississippi, solid, staunch Republican states, blew them out of the water, right? So on that same ballot, Adam Laxalt was able to ride the wave, but only narrowly, and nearly lost the Attorney General's race. He went on to serve through 2019, and instead of running for re-election for Attorney General, decided to focus his efforts on a governor election. Lost to Steve Sisolak by, I believe, 2 to 3%, and then now he's running for United States Senate. And his bid and his candidacy for the United States Senate is something that people originally doubted, and personally I did as well. I did not expect Adam Laxalt to do as well because rerun candidates, previously failed nominees, typically don't end up doing well again. I mean, you can talk to Russ Feingold in the state of Wisconsin and see just how poorly you do when you rerun as a candidate, even if you used to hold that exact Senate seat. Or ask Martha McSally from the state of Arizona. You typically don't want to run for re-election again, especially after you lost an election in recent history. 6-year apart Senate races is different than losing just 4 years prior, as we will be seeing with Adam Laxalt in this scenario. But the numbers don't lie. I mean, at the end of the day, even though this is a Republican pollster, this aligns with what we've been seeing in the state of Nevada. And all of the polls, while they all may have an R by their name, and the only one with a D by the name has the Democratic candidate ahead, we still have to take these numbers in and analyze them. And the NRSC aligns with what we've been seeing from WPAI, or what we've been seeing from 2 other Republican pollsters. They show that Adam Laxalt defeats Catherine Cortez Masto, sometimes by 5 points and sometimes by a narrow margin. One of them went so far as to say he wins by 10 points. I really don't trust that. It doesn't make sense that 26% of the electorate is undecided. But to have a Republican ahead in a toss-up battleground state when Joe Biden is immensely unpopular doesn't seem to be too unrealistic. But the interesting thing about these numbers, I would say, isn't the state of Nevada. I think we could have all expected Nevada as a state that has been won by the Democratic Party for the past few elections by the same exact amount. I mean, I kid you not, Hillary Clinton, Catherine Cortez Masto, Joe Biden have all won their elections by 2.4%. And when you look at that, and when you see that, that tells you something about the ability for the Democratic Party to have consistent victories, but not by large margins, which means that in a year that could be very much in the opposition to the Democratic Party, as 2022 is expected to be, Nevada could be a state that could shift by just simply 6 points to the right and ultimately put the Republicans ahead. But the interesting thing about this, again, to reiterate, is not Nevada, but more so the state of Georgia, a state that has been long foreseen as an immediate GOP pickup come the 2022 midterm elections. And the thing is, this NRSC poll doesn't actually match what we've seen from other pollsters in this exact race. Even the Trafalgar Group, which has difficulty putting Democrats ahead in a number of races, had difficulty putting Herschel Walker ahead, only putting him ahead by 2 percentage points. Whereas Public Policy Polling, which is again a Democratic pollster, they have polled a number of other races. We've talked about them time and time again. But then you have Redfield and Wilson Strategies, which is a nonpartisan pollster, showing Raphael Warnock ahead, sometimes by 6 points, in 2 different ways, amongst regular voters and registered voters and likely voters. The thing is, looking at these numbers, that Raphael Warnock defeats Herschel Walker in other polls, but not this NRSC one. And the fact that it has some type of Republican lean, some type of Republican advantage, because again, remind yourselves of who is doing these polls, they still only show Herschel Walker ahead of Raphael Warnock by simply just 1 percentage point. 1 percentage between the Democratic nominee and the Republican nominee. Now, Georgia is a state that is not shy at electing Republicans. The ability that the win for the Democratic Party in these Georgia runoff elections were so monumental because there was already a Republican incumbent in both of these races. The state of Georgia had 2 Republican senators prior to the 2021 runoffs, and it had been that way for a very long period of time. I mean, Georgia had not had a Democratic incumbent senator in a very long time. David Perdue was first elected in 2014 by over 7 percentage points. Kelly Loeffler never had an election, but was appointed by Governor Brian Kemp to fill the vacancy in the state of Georgia. Both of these people went on to lose. And when the Democratic Party won here, it was their first victory in a very long time across the state. Even Stacey Abrams could not win this race back in 2018 when the Democratic national environment was Democrat +8. So for Raphael Warnock to do well, even after Democrats have won control of the House, won the presidency, and this would be the only check and balance on a President Biden to prevent a trifecta, and the GOP falls flat on their face. So with Raphael Warnock's victory, people saw this as, okay, he was able to win in an election where the Democratic Party was riding on their 2020 energy, their anti-Trump sentiment here amongst the American people. And there was a lot against President Trump and all of these, both of these Republican candidates. And looking at what the runoff election did, it showed them that even with all of this stacked against the Republican Party, Raphael Warnock still only won by 2 percentage points. Given the fact that Georgia was in a position where it was heavily targeted and a lot of other things were funneled in there, and it was a $100 million race on both Democratic Party tickets, you might see this as a lack of enthusiasm and a lack of extreme voter support for the Democratic Party. And to an extent, you would be right. Democrats aren't going to win Georgia by 10 to 20 points in the near future. Georgia is still going to be a swing state likely for the next 10 years. But knowing that it's going to be a swing state and knowing our national environment, wouldn't you expect Raphael Warnock to be losing by a larger margin? I think this is a testament to Raphael Warnock's resiliency as an incumbent candidate, but also the fact that Republicans might have a better chance in Nevada than they do in Georgia. The fact that Georgia is holding out in other polls with a Democratic pollster involved, a nonpartisan pollster, both showing you that Raphael Warnock defeats Herschel Walker, and then you have one from the NRSC that shows Walker ahead by just 1 point. If I was a Republican in Georgia, I would be worried about my chances in 2022, because I see this more as, again, a testament to Raphael Warnock as an incumbent and a popular one at that, and also the fact that maybe the resources that are being allocated to Georgia need to be shifted to Nevada, because being ahead by 4 points at this point in time is a very good result for the GOP. This is a very good starting point, especially as we're not expecting Joe Biden to rebound over the next year by any type of substantial margin. I think that he will remain unpopular through the midterm elections, just as President Obama did twice, and potentially could recover in time for a re-election, but that's later down the line. But for Adam Laxalt to be ahead, again, as a previously failed nominee for governor across the state of Nevada, to be ahead by 4 points against an incumbent Democrat, very good result for the GOP. I think they should be very happy with this and should expand upon it. But for Herschel Walker to only be ahead of Raphael Warnock by 1 point when Joe Biden is down 7, 8, 9 points nationwide tells you a lot about that race. And I think that the Republican Party needs to realize that some races are worth more than others. And while they shouldn't give up by any means, Georgia or Nevada, I think that both of these races are absolutely winnable, and I even have them both in the Republican column in my most recent projection. But as I have already said, and as I've already projected, I do expect Georgia to be closer, meaning more likely to be Democratic, than I do Nevada. Because at this point in time, I think that when you see Georgia, you see a consistent Democratic Party growth, whereas Nevada, you see just a constant Democratic Party support. But it doesn't always hold up. There are circumstances where Georgia will go back red over the next 10 years. And there will also be some where Nevada goes red. But I do think that as you start to see the population growth in Atlanta, it didn't halt after the 2020 election. I don't think people realize this. Georgia is not as Republican today as it was a year ago. Not nearly as Republican today as it was 5 years ago in the 2016 presidential election. That's the thing that people need to realize. The state of Georgia is increasingly getting bluer, whereas Nevada just simply isn't. It's remaining stagnant. And while Democrats in a normal year or a Democratic lean year, of course, will win in Nevada, in a year like 2022, where Republicans are expected to do very well and pick up a number of seats, I think Nevada could be one of the first to go. And not necessarily Georgia. And the NRSC data backs me up on that point. But again, to say that this should be given up by the Republican Party is wrong. I think that they should certainly target it. They have immense opportunities in both of these Senate races to completely flip partisan control of the United States Senate. But I also do want to say that some races are definitely going to be more easily won than others, and some might need the honing in on, whereas Georgia might be able to remain a swing state up until the end. And then you start to focus on again, because Nevada and Georgia have had a very interesting relationship. Sometimes they shift in opposite directions, but ultimately, as it stands today, as a snapshot on December 26th, 2021, I would say that Nevada seems to be more of a winnable target for Republicans than Georgia. And I can't imagine myself of saying that just a year ago. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.